Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Johnson. Today I'll be presenting the scenario for Universal Flowers Racing, which is a global race organizer seeking to develop a platform for runners to raise money for charities. The current landscape is composed of disparate regional databases that they're trying to replace in a phased rollout within 6 months within North America, and then within a year within the European markets. Their outcome ideally is that they want to replace the current race operations platform with a long-term reporting capable as well as scalable, able to handle variant loads of peak volumes and traffic, and then also to correct some of the fragmented or complexity that is going to be mitigated through governance that I'll call it right now. So some of the governance risk is that there's lack of control through development and where developers are deploying directly to production. So in order to mitigate this, we'll be applying strict governance around a CI/CD pipeline, including change advisory board for deployments and approvals there to production. The additional governance risks identified was compliance, and specifically with EU and US compliance. So we'll be embedding the Romanian team for EU compliance within the steering committee as well as within the COE for that European Union compliance, and then also we'll be enabling Shield for the privacy centers so that we have the data access rights and data privacy rights enabled there. We'll be also embedding a steering committee within the government's framework that will be applying a strategic vision as well as a federated COE model with a centralized COE for global best practices, and then a federated regional COEs for regional flexibility. Then finally, there's a risk around the timeline and the timeline constraints being a 6-month pilot and the distributed team and approvals that cannot scale with velocity within that restricted timeline. I'm recommending that we establish a racing matrix and then also delegate decision authority so there's not bottlenecks in the approval processes. Some of the assumptions I made is that Salesforce will be a system record for race operations. There will be a tracker database for a system record for racer tracking, and that will also enable a hub sub model. Okta will be the identity layer that will be backed by an internal Active Directory identity store, and then an external Active Directory identity store that will be enabled via LDAP. And then DashPay will be enabled as a payment gateway. There will be a race registry, a system record for racer history, and there will be a static single-page application that will be hosted via a CDN for guest tracking. The ESB will then own the RFID tracking as well as the mapping to tracker IDs that will be public for the mapping there, and that will expose experience APIs for the SPA to then consume. Now to the actors. We have internally the regional managers, the territory race coordinators, and the territory route leaders. They will all receive sales code license for the access to the opportunities for orders. They will be, the regional managers will be per region, and then the role hierarchy will roll down from there to the territory race coordinators, territory route leaders. The record visibility will cascade up from there from the territory route leader ownership. Customer support will receive service cloud license as well as additional engagement for the cases in the live chat. The racers will receive Customer Community Plus license for reporting and advanced sharing, as well as the charity personnel and the adventure coordinators, adventure trackers. Okay. On now to the requirements, the system landscape rather. So the system itself is rolled out with a single org, given the fact that we want to unify data privacy processes in collaboration. This will be also rolled out with multi-language enabled via translation workbench for the translation of the metadata using a translation point of contact. We'll also enable custom labels and Visualforce email templates for the translation of emails as well as metadata. The multi-current will be enabled for the global reach of this org. The single org here will have charging installed as the abstraction of the transactions that will integrate with the DashPay gateway for the actual the payment processing. The digital engagement will be enabled for the live chat feature. Salesforce Voice will be enabled for the inbound calls and outbound calls for the service reps. SDocs will be enabled for the PDF generation, and Shield will be enabled for the privacy center capabilities. The internal users will be authenticating using SAML via Okta. Okta will be backed by the internal Active Directory store Internal users will also authenticate to an internal app, which will be enabled via the Salesforce app that will authorize using off-code with Bixby Flow, given the fact that it cannot store the client secret. The external users would authenticate using either of two different paths, which will be the YDC path, which will be enabled via auth provider set up for Facebook and Twitter, which in turn then ID to have the option of authenticating using SAML via Okta, which is backed by will have its credentials provisioned by Okta, as well as natively, as well as by the charity personnel as well. The solution takes an API-led approach to integrations connecting systems using reusable APIs. This is managed by an ESB, secured by a JOT-based trust model. These ESB is integrated with the sub-public SPA via experience APIs, as well as the vendor trackers, Racer registry, and the tracker database. ETL is also provisioned for the migration of Racer database rec on the cutover for North America and then eventually for Europe. Okay, moving on now to the requirements, we have the planning of races, which is done by the territory route leader. So they will initially create a race record, which is private. They'll own that record. They will then maintain, once they've created the record, they'll maintain race waypoints. Those are stored as well as custom records via the waypoint object, and they're controlled by parent. They will create them within the Salesforce mobile app via an LWC that is enabled for geolocation that will then create the waypoints themselves. Then they will capture them. They will be stored sequentially. They will have maximum of 100 different waypoints, and they will be master detail relationship with the race itself. The race is owned by the territory route leader, and the respective managers can access them via the role hierarchy that they're within. The race record with its waypoints related will be the origin of the eventual products that are created, as well as the race waypoints that are derived from the waypoints themselves on the race date. The leaders will submit the race using a status field by marking it as submitted. That will then trigger an approval flow that will route the race record to the coordinator. The coordinator will then review the race itself and then mark the race status as approved pending the fee. The territory race coordinator will then be able to once the status is set to approved pending fee, the territory route leader will add the fee to the race itself. That will then determine what the product price book entries that are created from the product are. So as soon as the race itself is ready to be viewed by everyone, they will mark the race status as open, which will be triggered by the race fee being populated. That will then create the product as well as the price book entry for the actual fee. The product's org-wide default is public read-only by default, so that everyone can access the race for ordering, as well as the price book entries and the price books themselves. The race array summary is then is able to be reported on, which is an aggregation of the historical race records. The territory route leaders will be able to do reporting on the race array summary, and they will be able to do so as well via the mobile device with that standard reporting feature too. We'll have also dashboards enabled for the territory route leaders to quickly be able to do reporting on the races themselves during the approval. Okay. The external racers will be able to authenticate to the portal via the registration handler that is set up for the portal access. This will be enabled via OID that is set up for Facebook and Twitter. They will also be able to self-register themselves via Okta as the identity provider, which will authenticate them via SAML and then provision them within the LDAP separately. So they'll be provisioned not only within Salesforce, but also within the LDAP, and this will be facilitated and orchestrated by Okta as an identity provider. Once the racer is set up as the person account, then the Salesforce will integrate with the racer registry to populate the person account's registry ID. This will be done using request to reply and REST API, and ESB will orchestrate that. During the migration as well, we want to also populate the registry IDs as well. Registry IDs onto the person accounts. That will be facilitated within the ETL pipeline as a separate process and during the cutover window or before the cutover window. There will be also the duplicate validation that will need to occur if there is an existing user with the same first name, last name, and email address. The Okta will orchestrate the duplicate check, and if Okta identifies a duplicate within the external LDAP, then it will request that the user confirm that that user's the duplicate and then allow for them to initiate a password reset rather than creating a duplicate user. The Racer portal will be accessible as well as the mobile publisher via that Okta authentication or OIDC. Once they're authenticated, they'll be able to do searches for races via this product object, and price book entries will be in price book entries they'll search for, or they'll search for products initially, and then they will be able to pay for those products via the price book entry records that are created when the product is published, when the race is published and accessible. The racers will be able to view their own racer info and previous races via external objects for the race history and the race records themselves. They'll be able to search for the different published races, and then they'll be able to update their own current data within the system using their person account record, which will integrate with the registry system using Fire and Forget and CDC that will publish those different changes to the registry system. Racers will be able to run reports on races run and charity sponsored and total amount via the race summary object itself. That will be accessible to them using sharing sets. Those sharing sets will then they will be able to report, the visibility will be enabled by sharing sets, and then they'll be able to run reports, given the fact that they're Customer Community Plus users. The Territory Race Coordinator will set the actual maximum capacity for the race based on the product record itself. And then there will be registered flow on the different orders that are created for the races, so the registrations for the races, to count the capacity, compare the capacity with that count of registered racers, and then if the capacity is exceeded, we'll update the product as is active false, so it's no longer to be registered for. When a racer is registering themselves, they will have a screen flow that will on the enable screen, they will set their competition level, which will be based on their couch potatoes to super athlete. Once they're past that screen, they select then to pay, and then that will create a charge and order that will initiate them to select a payment method that will then, once they have completed the payment via chargent, that will create then the order and the order item that is activated. If the chargent transaction is failed, there will be a record trigger flow that will send a notifications to the racer saying that it's failed so they can retry it on the same charge and order. And DashPay will facilitate the processing of the payment, and chargent itself will abstract actual transaction. So we're not storing any credit card information directly on the platform. We're only storing tokenized information there. DashPay serves as a microservice for other applications. So we're taking an API-led approach with DashPay as an external gateway for transaction processing itself. Once the order is marked as paid, there will be record trigger flow to update the order with the unique tracker ID. That will then email the tracker ID to the racer, so that they can then forward that on to the friends and family, so that the friends and family can view them from the website that they have access to via that single page application I'll talk about later. The unique tracker ID is stored in a ESP-based mapping store that maps the tracker IDs to the RFIDs. Racers can view the pledges for their own race entry. They can select the default charity via the order object record itself that is created once they've paid. They own that record, and they can then update the charity lookup, which is looking up to the business account, which is the charity. Once the order is paid, there's also furthermore a record flow that will evaluate to see if they are eligible for the Premier Race Start Group. This is going to be based on external objects that are stored externally and also surfaced within the platform that will then count the number of races they've run. If it is over 5, then we'll email the racer a link to opt into the order premier flag. That will then eventually create their membership for the start group for the premier start group. Racers will be able to ask questions via chatter and then also search the site for materials that are available in multiple languages via knowledge articles. Racers will be able to raise requests via the case object that is linked to then the link to their person account, and also linked to, if there are already issues with the delivery of the racing bib or RFID, they can also create a case for the specific shipping via the order item itself. The racer can cancel the registration via a quick action on the order itself. That will then integrate with the visual trackers to evaluate whether or not the items have been shipped yet. And if they have been shipped, then they will only receive half of their registration fee refunded. Otherwise, they'll receive full refund. This will be orchestrated by the ESB, and then a charge at refund will be created based on that shipment status that is pulled by the ESB. Moving on now to the race day. So there's going to be peak loads during the events where guest users will need to be able to access at the same time multiple different, or a single racer, and they're be able to track them through multiple refreshes. So we need to optimize for reads with CQRS and event projection. The way that we're going to accomplish this is on telemetry push. So when the RFID publishes an event that is a progress event, the tracker, the ESB, will subscribe to those events and then store within its own local storage and mapping of the RFID to the progress via PubSub API and event broker, so that there's an optimized read store within the ESB layer. And when the users, or when the guest users, access the SPA, single page application, it will simply be querying the ESB's local read optimized store of RFIDs to progress. That will then accept those tracker IDs, those queries will accept those tracker IDs, and then return the latest progress of that specific racer. If they choose to enter a pledge amount and donate money, it will first of all, from the single page application, create a pledge record within Salesforce with their email address and the amount that they are going to pledge. And then they'll simultaneously be redirected to DashPay for payment with the pledge ID. When on success of DashPay for the payment processing, DashPay will communicate the successful message to the pledge record within Salesforce, update the status as successful, or if the processing failed, then it will update the pledge with failure message, and then also email the guest with that guest email. There's a requirement in this solution for 5 years worth of historic race information to be stored on the platform. So what we're going to do to mitigate that, to protect the performance of the system itself, we'll aggregate any pledge data after the race. We'll aggregate all the pledge data onto the race summary records so that that's accessible on the platform. And then that will be the ongoing store for reporting itself, so that we're mitigating the large data volumes. And then we're hard deleting the pledges after the race and after they've been summarized and the charity has been debited. During the race time, they will be able to view within the single page application, the topological map of the race progress. And we're handling the load volumes and the peak variance to absorb those short-lived spikes within that single page application, rather than having it posted on the Experience Cloud portal as guest users. When the order is activated, there will be retrograde flow that will integrate with the adventure trackers for the creation of the shipping requests within that system. The adventure trackers will return then the ship number that will be stored within the ERD here on the order item level, the shipping number. And then in order for them to track the status of the shipment, the racers themselves will be able to access the orders and the order items and refresh the page for the order item to return the shipment status based on that tracking number. This will be using a request and reply and REST API, ESB returning then the shipment status itself. The scheduled flow, there will be a scheduled flow 10 days prior to the race that will assign the different registered racers that are stored on the order per order with the start group. The start group will be based on, the start groups that they're assigned to will be based on, first of all, the flag for premier race that's stored on the order. So for those, we will ensure that their start group via the start group member junction object here is set to premier race. Otherwise, what we'll do for any other racers, we'll set the capacity number based on the capacity number of the race itself, which is on the product. We'll have a designated number of start groups and start group members that can be created under those start groups. And then there will be the assignment of those different racers to those start groups via this start group member object, and that will be orchestrated by the scheduled flow 10 days prior to the race. And then once they have been assigned to the start groups via the start group member, there will be a regular flow that will email the racer with that group number. Okay. The waypoints will communicate the actual location, since it is system record for the location. And then one day after the race, the scheduled apex will run, which will aggregate all the different pledges that were associated with the registration of that racer, aggregate them, and then debit the charity with the aggregated pledges. And once the debit has occurred, and once the ES has confirmed that all the pledges have been debited, we will delete the pledge records after we've already aggregated the records into the race summary aggregated object here. The regional managers will be able to edit the race charity accounts for their region based on criteria-based sharing rules. Given the fact that there's only 3 regions, we can use that for the different roles for the regional managers. Once the race summary is created, we'll also trigger the creation of an SDoc PDF that is associated with the charity themselves. That will then be emailed to the charity as well as associated with the charity account record. Charity organizations will register themselves via web to lead or email to lead from the portal. That will create initially a lead record that is the application for the charity. If they are validated by the regional manager, that will then convert them to the business account. They'll be able to log in via Okta using that same identity flow that I described earlier with the rare users. If they are set up via Okta, then they'll also be provisioned in the LDAP as well, external LDAP. For the external charities, they will also have the ability to create user accounts for their specific charity. They will do so using Okta as well, and they'll be able to create charity users for their specific charity. The charities will also be able to view knowledge articles, and they will also be able to view the translation for those knowledge articles using the out-of-the-box knowledge translation feature. The charities will be able to view their donations, the donation pledge reports for their charity based on the criteria-based sharing rules. They'll be able to view the sharing sets that are associated with the race summary, and they'll also have access to the PDFs that are created associated with their account. And then charities will be able to run monthly and yearly reports on those based on that standard reporting, given the fact they have Customer Community Plus license. The charity personnel should not be able to view any racer details or be able to edit any of them, so that will be enforced by the field level security. They'll be able to only update phone number, website, and email address based on the fact that they are based on FLS as well. And if they want to change other things like bank routing number or mailing address, they will have to create a case which is associated with their account. That will be private, and then that record type would be charity. Be able to report using race summary. And then on the governance topic, there's a history of misaligned priorities here with the IT prioritization. So we'll have a steering committee that will apply vision and COE guardrails that will create the definition-ready stories that are aligned with the PMO and CMO requirements. And those definition-ready stories will then be evaluated for the definition of done criteria once the development has occurred. The service users will be able to log complaints or receive calls using Salesforce Voice. That will be enabled. The routing to those agents will be enabled by omnichannel, and then look up to the registration. Case criteria-based sharing rules will open read-only access to all the cases for the service users, and then they'll have read-only access unless they own it. They'll have edit access at that point. The Salesforce will integrate with the venture trackers to surface the registration shipment status that will be stored on the order item itself. The case will, if a case is created that's a complaint for the race, so if there's a lookup on the case to the race, then that will assign the case to a territory queue that has the territory route leader and territory race coordinator is responsible, so they can then address those. And then if a case is created, then the record flow will assign the territory race coordinator immediately if it's related to their racer bib or radio frequency tracker. That will then assign it to their race coordinator immediately, and then SLAs will be enforced by a case escalation rule that will notify the manager. And finally, the registered racers and charity personnel will be able to chat with agents via digital engagement. Moving on to the requirement migration. So this is assuming for the 6 months that we're addressing the 6 month requirement for North America. So first of all, we're going to have a data steward that is going to profile the American data and from the racer databases to ensure that there's data quality standards and that we're incorporating all the data and that we're following target schema mapping with the person account, the business account, the products, and the racer race summary records here. The data steward will provision then the ETL with those data, as well as with the data from the registry system for the external IDs that will need to be mapped to the racer IDs or racer records. Before that happens, though, within the pipeline and within the staged pipeline, we'll cleanse the data, duplicate the data, and assign those external IDs from the registry system. And then those records are ordered from parent to child. The object order will be assigned from parent to child to ensure relational integrity. The records, once they're loaded into the staged ETL pipeline, that will then follow with migration rehearsals, followed by a controlled cutover window that will migrate the data into production, followed by a smoke testing as well as a UAT sign-off of the person accounts, business accounts, product records, and the racer race summary records. And that will be done with the sharing deferred and automations deactivated. And that's the entire presentation. I'll open for any questions. Thank you.